Welcome to Coffee with the Principals. My name is Jake Booker, and this is a podcast designed to explore one aspect of our school system that can be researched, written, recorded, and produced in the amount of time it takes me to finish my cup of coffee. Today, I'm drinking a coffee shop blend by Keurig. This is the first in our remote learning series, and it's focused on classroom management. The information is going to be coming from the Distance Learning Playbook by Fisher, Frey, and Hattie. So the first thing we want to do when talking about classroom management, either in brick and mortar or in remote, is to think about and think through our teaching and learning philosophy. This is something that new to service teachers are often asked to do as part of like recent coursework or the interview process. But as we become more veteran, often our philosophy becomes internalized and really mixes into our core beliefs and identity. And it becomes just an aspect of our personality. Then, when someone comes and asks you to articulate your teaching and learning philosophy, it kind of like it's deep, right? It can require a level of personal introspection that makes you feel like you're in some sort of therapy or counseling session. So the challenge is that we're going to be teaching using a different modality, and the need to be very intentional is critical. So spend some time and think about how you'll be able to articulate your philosophy to a dozen kids on a Zoom session, right? This is something that we all do in the first days of school in a brick and mortar classroom environment. We might not call it out specifically because it's more performative, more demonstrative, and experiential. But in our remote learning environment, we have to be very intentional and very explicit. Ask yourself how you typically demonstrate your core beliefs to your kids in a brick and mortar, and then how you see yourself translating that into the digital world. So, one aspect of classroom management that shifts in remote learning is the specific procedures, routines, and expectations for ourselves, our families, and our scholars. In the brick and mortar, a scholar will raise their hand and to ask a question. They'll take a pass to go to the bathroom. Snacks happen at specific times, and homework is turned in following a specific process that you have been using for years. And absolutely everyone knows that homework goes in the beat up metal tray on the back counter next to your sink. These are all the procedures that are going to have to be reimagined, articulated, and then even agreed upon in some instances with your class. There's this need now to really define your procedures, those routines, and the expectations. And that's even more important in a remote learning universe than it is in the brick and mortar, because the nature of your contact is going to be different. It's not worse, it's just different. The modality that you're teaching in will be changing, but clear procedures, routines, expectations are going to be what determines the quality of your management, not whether you're using Zoom, Teams, Google Hangouts, or you're doing it in person. So ask yourself a couple of questions. What are your procedures, routines, and expectations going to be during remote learning, and what specific teacher moves are you going to make to ensure that all scholars understand them? Okay, let's go into the weeds. I'm going to use the term norms and agreements as a substitution for procedures, routines, expectations, and even rules. So the first thing I want you to do is think about your favorite classroom management strategies. Have you been using, like a building aligned PBIS Tier 1 strategies, or are you a champion of champs or an envoy master? When you think about each one of those, one of the things that strikes me is this unifying thread, and that is their reliance on posting norms in a way that it's visible. In classroom and in hallways, we spend a lot of time and effort posting those looks like, sounds like posters on our doors, right? We take excerpts from our PBIS matrix and plaster them all over the hallways. And we even make like demonstration videos to show what it should look like as you're walking down the hall or you're walking out to the bus. Those all work great in brick and mortar buildings, but in remote learning, you're going to have to think about how to make those norms visible. One way to do that is to create a Zoom background that just states your norms. Then when you're teaching, you could just point to one of them and there's your nonverbal cueing. Just right here, this is one that I use when we have book studies. And it's just I just took the Pacific Education Group 4 agreements conditions and threw them up in my background. And there I go, I've made those norms visible. Try to keep it simple, no more than 5 agreements. And just like any new complicated math lesson, pre-think that lesson out, right? And think about when you get ready to start teaching your norms, what you're going to be doing, right? Like think through what those norms need to be addressed, which norms need to be addressed, and then be ready to guide your scholars through that process so they can co-construct them with you. I'll tell you, years ago, I learned that if I went in without a plan, one of those kids was going to make a plan for me. So make sure that you're ready when you do that session. Next thing, try to state your agreements positively, right? Avoid creating the big list of bossy no's. Then remember that anytime we're teaching behavior, the key is to explicitly describe and identify that desired behavior. This very intentional teaching will help your scholars self-regulate. Finally, once and done is not enough. Norms need to be rehearsed, retaught continuously. And keep in mind that unstated norms will evolve for better or for worse. So get in front of it and have a plan. So that's it. My coffee is almost gone, and I think we hit some of the key points on establishing norms in a remote learning environment. Next in the series, we're going to continue exploring that distance learning playbook. Thanks for joining me.